Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast, the Glacier Peak Wilderness edition. So on day 6, we woke up, Molly, much earlier than I.
Yeah, I was going to get a beautiful sunrise because what the heck, I'm staying on Miners Ridge. We're by Image Lake. I'm going to watch that majestic sunrise occur over this beautiful glaciated mountain. So got up out of the tent at 6 a.m. to capture that and found out that it looked about the same as the sunset the night before. But it was no clouds in the sky or anything, but there was a nice little pink glow. And it was just like this perfect stillness, right? There was no one else out there. Carrie was, I think she was asleep at that point, or she was frozen to death. Hard for me to know. She wasn't moving. But I got to stand there and just like witness just the beauty as the lights were turned on and, you know, the sun rose and there was a pink on the mountain. So that was cool. Just a couple birds chirping and that was it. Very still morning with the Western Pask meadow just everywhere. And a part of the moon was up too, which was cool. But I do remember thinking, oh my goodness, I am going to take a couple pictures, enjoy this moment, and then get back in the tent because, as Carrie mentioned, it was chilly. And so at this point, you know, we planned our trip kind of I think it was the third week of August. So this day was the 24th of August. And yeah, that's getting late in the Pacific Northwest. And so we finally really dealt with some chilly temperatures at night and in the morning, which I think tends to happen, I guess, if you're on a ridge on a clear day. But then on the JMT, we found that camping in a valley can also be cold. So it can just be cold anywhere.
One thing that's remarkable about this camping area is the toilet there is like a 10 million star view. So you sit down to take your, morning special poop time. And I was trying to think of a more clever way to say it, but guys, I don't have that kind of time. Anyway, so you like sit down and then you look up and boom, it's like funny in a way because the campsites didn't actually have an unobstructed view of Glacier Peak. The only place you had a totally unobstructed view besides like the ridge was on the toilet. And I told Molly, I think it's because everyone gets to use the toilet. So we all get to enjoy the view. So it wouldn't be fair if it was just one campsite getting that view, but each person there can enjoy that from the toilet.
And a lot of Washington State does a great job of having backcountry, like, it's not a composting toilet. I don't even know what you would call it. Whatever.
I call it big special toilet. Thank you.
So they do a great job of providing those near campsites in the backcountry, which I think is awesome because then you minimize just human waste in other areas. So it was really bougie because the last 2 days of our trip, we actually were going to get to camp at places that had like backcountry outhouses essentially. So we were pretty excited about that, especially after being in the heart of the Glacier Peak Wilderness on the PCT. It's a very remote area. And now we're feeling like there's a few more luxuries. The sun is actually out. We are not socked in the clouds. And so I think we still would think of Glacier Peak Wilderness fondly, but the fact that we got to end our trip with the last couple of days being like so sunny and beautiful, I feel like just really painted this beautiful picture for us and made the suffering that we went through earlier worth it.
So we kind of took our time getting going in the morning because we knew we only had 11 miles to do that day, 1,800 feet of elevation gain. So compared to the day before, basically nothing.
And we got to choose if we wanted to stay at either, I think, is it called Lower Lyman Lake or Upper Lyman Lake? So we had options as far as how far we wanted to go. If we stayed at Upper Lyman Lake that evening, I think we only had an 8-mile hike out the next day to our vehicle. So we had plenty of options available to us.
So we finally got going, and then it's funny because honestly, the first few days had been wonderful and beautiful to us, but this evening before and this morning were stunningly beautiful. So we went along the ridge, which Miners Ridge is amazing. It's in your face views of the mountain, and it's kind of hilarious when I look at my camera roll because it's like a for real just modeling camera shoot. Just picture. And I just remember we did stop and take so many pictures along the ridge, but we had earned that right, you guys. I mean, every other picture that we had taken had been us being this is going okay, Mom. We're still alive.
with like a totally white background of every picture. Like you'd be like, you don't know where they are. So it's just like we had to soak in all the views. Do you remember, Carrie, did we stop by Image Lake in the morning before we left, or did we just take the junction and head out?
I'm pretty sure we didn't stop by Image Lake because we were like, well, we did sit there for like 2 hours last night. And so since we weren't in a rush in the morning, I mean, yeah, maybe we got some water near there because there's not a ton of water along the ridge. But other than that, we just kind of started going down. And this was where we kind of discovered that most people were just day hiking Miners Ridge and not staying there, because we met like probably 3 groups, I'd say, as we went down the ridge. And it was like kind of shocking to us because the night before had been so private and so, quiet, and we've been so alone. And then it was like, whoa, there's like 6 people in a group coming up here. But I mean, I was glad for them to get to enjoy the experience because it was just so beautiful.
Yeah, so we walked along Miners Ridge, once again, just really soaking in just the beautiful views of Glacier Peak. And then it was getting to be kind of hot. So we were on an exposed ridge. I think there was one other spot that maybe we stopped and grabbed a little bit of water. And then we finally started to descend into more forested terrain to actually connect with the Pacific Crest Trail.
We didn't stay on the Pacific Crest Trail very long, though, because it's like you jump off of Miners Ridge onto the Pacific Crest Trail, and then in, I'd say, less than 2 miles, we found ourselves junctioning with another trail, the trail that would take us off the PCT. It takes you to Cloudy Pass, but the Pacific Crest Trail was going to continue on towards Rainy Pass and then eventually Canada.
So we junctioned with the trail that would take us towards Cloudy Pass. And at this point, then, we were seeing more people again. We kind of mixed with different groups of hikers as we continued towards the pass. And I remember when we rounded the bend to like start the ascent towards Cloudy Pass, thinking like, oh, that doesn't even look very bad. It just looks like this kind of chill grade. And then, of course, it always happens when you're hiking, when you think something's not going to be very bad, and then it's harder than you expect. So
and we have like the 2 sides of the spectrum here, because I looked at it and I was like, that's going to be terrible, because there was like a little bit of rocks on it. It was kind of an interesting pass because it wasn't just like clear cut trail. It was like you had to do the most minor boulders ever, but it was still,
and really the trail like went very easily through the boulders, but from a distance you're like, wow, we're going to be navigating through these massive boulders. And then I guess it turns out that Carrie,
I was just on the total opposite side of that, where I was like, oh, it's going to be so bad. And then I was like, oh, this actually isn't so bad. I mean, it's like a little bit of like, again, you're going through a boulder area, but it's not like we'd done Mount St. Helens where it's just like hands and feet scrambling. But this is kind of like, I have to walk around this boulder now.
And for me, it was actually just the uphill. Like I was thinking it wasn't very hard because the pass isn't super steep, but just I think the 6 days of being walking every day was catching up to me a bit. So I do remember it required a little bit of effort. I took a couple breaks as we continued up, but it was really cool because then when we got to the top of Cloudy Pass, we were treated to a view of Lyman Lakes below us. And so these lakes are really beautiful because they are that beautiful, like bright blue, kind of glacial color, especially the lower lake.
And it comes like directly from the Lyman Glacier, so it's so close to the source, and it's super just like silty and stunning and amazing. And I think we just felt so, I mean, every day that you're not walking in fog, after walking in fog, you're just like filled to the brim with gratitude. Yeah. Like we were standing up there like, I can't believe we get to see this. Can you imagine if we could only see 5 feet in front of us? We wouldn't even be able to see these stunning lakes. So it was like we got to enjoy that beautiful vista, and then we kind of headed down. We decided we were going to hang out at Lower Lyman Lake for just a little bit because we still felt pretty energized and like we'd like to be up at Upper Lyman Lake for the sunset. It was kind of funny because there was supposed to be a toilet down there, and we never were able to locate it. Remember, we kept trying to find it, but we never did. And I guess that was fine. But there seemed to be only one real access point that we could find where you could actually get down very close to the lake. And kind of as we made our way there was a couple sitting there who said basically, oh, we've been sitting here for well over an hour and you can go ahead and have your turn. But they had actually gone on a bus to, I want to say Holden Village. And so that was kind of how they had gotten there. So they were quite shocked to hear, like they still had to hike, I think like 20 miles or so. but they were quite shocked to hear that we were on day 6, I believe, of our backpacking trip. So that was kind of a fun little experience. And they were the first people who told us about the high bush or low bush huckleberries, which has since been debunked by my research. But that really threw Molly and I for a loop for about 3 years. So thanks to them.
But yeah, it was really nice because I'm looking at my pictures, and I think it was like 3:30 or 3 p.m. when we got to Lower Lyman Lake. So we really just got to sit and enjoy the view for a solid, maybe it was only 20 minutes. I thought it was a long time. I'm looking at my pictures, a solid 20 minutes.
It's funny because it felt like a long time, but I think it was just because we hadn't had time to just hang out at a lake in a while. Yeah. And we took off our shoes and we put on our sandals. And this was my big mistake that I learned a little lesson from. So I decided I was just going to hike to Upper Lyman Lakes in my sandals because I was like, well, why do I want to put socks on for what? It's like a 1 mile journey up there. Oh boy, did I regret that. I kicked every rock in the world with my toe. And I was like, okay, some people are able to hike in sandals and I'm just not one of them.
I think I'm one of them that could for 1 mile, but I was like continuously afraid of like somehow like having weird traction and like tweaking my ankle. But yeah, so it's that again. It's back. So we hiked in our Tevas up to Upper Lyman, and that was kind of a fun hike. It was a short distance, but you had to gain a fair amount of elevation between the two.
And I feel like a lot of different peaks came into view that we had never ever seen before. I believe Seven Fingered Jack you're able to see as you hike up, and Mount Maud, and these are just cool looking mountains. And again, we had been starved for views for days, so like anything we saw was like, oh, a mountain, we've seen it. And so I think that was kind of what made that a super fun little hike up. And then
on a day where or on a trip rather, where we'd been hiking, and I feel like maybe my view is totally skewed. Here I was thinking we were doing these long days and like getting to camp late. And really that was only like 2 days of the trip. Otherwise on Fire Creek Pass, we stopped early. And this was another day where we were able to like pitch our tent and like have our campsite ready by like 5 p.m.
Again, this is why this was a terrible reinforcement for us, that you can just start as late as you want every single day of your life and it doesn't matter, because we still pulled decent mileage, like 16-mile days sometimes, and we still would get to our camp pretty early. And so what did I learn? Literally nothing. But I did learn my lesson later on the Copper Ridge Loop that you can't do that all the time. But when we headed up to Upper Lyman Lake, I remember we got there and there was this rock where there was, do you remember this? A trowel, an ultralight trowel sitting there. And we were like, is this a sign from the Lord that we must take this trowel? And now we have 2 trowels. Because we had decided we were going to get 2 trowels before next year. But we ended up deciding not to take it because we weren't sure if someone had left it there. Although now I'm like, no, it definitely was set there probably days prior because somebody lost it and we should have.
There was also a t-shirt on the rock. Mm-hmm. So I felt like if we were going to take the towel, we would also have to take, trowel. If we were going to take the trowel, we would also need to take the t-shirt. And I just didn't feel like I wanted to carry that many things in my pack.
It's a big commitment. So we didn't take the trowel, but we did end up finding a little spot to camp. And I don't know, it was just wonderful to finally get to our campsite for the night, to feel like we had finished a lot of our trek and to just get ready to settle in and enjoy the unbelievable beauty that is the basin that Upper Lyman Lake is in.
So now that we had our tent pitched in the Upper Lyman Lake area, we could start to socialize with all the other backpackers that were getting in and setting up their camps too.
Yeah, we met these 2 girls that were friends that were hiking from Seattle. They brought a dog with them, which will become relevant later in this story, but that dog loved me. I am a huge fan of like labradoodles and double doodles. Like, I just love them. They're such nice dogs. And it like literally would not leave us. I feel like the owner would be calling it and it just wanted to hang out with us. I have this funny video. We went to collect some water, which of course you can only collect from a glacially fed stream there. So we tried to collect where it was flowing faster because glacially fed streams will clog your filter and you actually can't get rid of it from back flushing. So it does slow your filter down. Anyway, but I kept trying to fill my water, like our little bag. And every time I'd sit down, that dog would have gotten so close to me that I had to be like sitting on the dog. So I'd pet it, get it to kind of back away a little bit. And then I'd crouch down and sit on the dog again. And it was just kind of a funny little thing. So we met them and visited with them for a little while.
And the dog was also, they were wanting to use like a natural bug spray on it. So basically it was wearing like a variety of essential oils to prevent bugs from bothering it. So that's all fine and dandy until like the dog is continuously like rubbing up against you and you're petting it. And now you're like, oh, like I smell very strongly of this dog's natural bug spray. And I can't even like wash my hands or anything because I'm living outside.
We also met a nice dad who was backpacking with his 2 sons, and they were going to be going out the same way as us the next day. And we visited with them for a little bit. And then we met this other guy, and he was just like so happy to be at Upper Lyman Lake. Apparently he'd been there several times, and he was like, I'll show you guys this secret spot that I camp at, which I'm not going to tell you guys about because we promised him that we would never tell anyone else where it was. But he took us to it and showed us, like, it's this beautiful spot where you can look from Upper Lyman Lake onto Lower Lyman Lake, and it kind of is secluded and private. And so that was really fun to go and see that. Then we went back and we just watched the sunset. And this area is so stunning because, first of all, the lake is beautiful, but the rocks there are so colorful too. And it's like you're in an amphitheater basically with like a 360 degree view of just like stunning, beautiful rocks. There's a glacier that's still active. There's this lake that's full of glacial silt, so it's a stunning like turquoise color. I mean, we definitely got like all the best photos of our trip on that night because it was just so beautiful. And it just was like that triumphant, fun feeling where you're like, I've finally done the thing that I set out to do, and everything's just beautiful, and everything so far has turned out relatively okay. However, there was one thing that had been weighing on us this whole trip. So to exit Lyman Lakes via Phelps Creek Trail, which is where we had parked our Jeep those many days prior, you have to go over something called the Lyman Glacier. No, it's not the Lyman. The Spider. You have to go over Spider Gap. But so one side of it is just a permanent snowfield, but the other side is actually an active glacier. And so Molly did know about this the whole time. This is not, she's going to try and tell you, I never told her, but she knew about it because we had discussed not bringing our micro spikes. And I said, we have to bring them because we're going to go on a glacier, which is so crazy because like on a real glacier, micro spikes aren't going to do nothing. The fortunate thing about that glacier for our hiking purposes is it's really not like a major glacier. But I didn't know that at the time. So I started getting super anxious because the girls that we met from Seattle, one girl was like, yeah, it's like pretty scary, but it's fine. And the other girl was pretty freaked out by it. And they were going to have to exit out the same way the next day. And
what was she freaked out about?
I don't remember. I think she was kind of a newer hiker. Like, I think they were kind of a mismatched pair where one was pretty experienced and she brought this girl on a trip that girl like wasn't even used to the steepness or the angle, and she didn't have micro spikes. So maybe she was slipping. Do you know?
Well, I don't know. I was just seeing if you remembered, because I think maybe she was talking about when they got to their campsite. I don't know if it was like earlier or later in the day, but I think she was talking about how it was slippery and it was steep and she was feeling really uncomfortable. Yeah. So that did spark a little bit of like an anxiety, like, oh, like what will tomorrow hold when it comes to having to travel on the Lyman Glacier up to Spider Gap and then on the snowfield to descend.
Yeah, so I definitely that night went to bed like so happy and thankful for everything that had gone well so far on our trip, but I was getting so nervous about the next day because I was like, what the heck am I doing out here? We're going on a glacier with zero experience, zero glacier skills, and like everything I'd read, people were doing it just fine, like because again, it's kind of like a weird gray area where like it's not huge crevasses. It's not like a very active glacier. But I was just so like torn up inside. And I told Molly finally, I said, we're going to get a really early start on tomorrow because like, I think that'll be the best bet for us to have a safe trip on the glacier. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
If you want to see, once again, the best photos of our trip, which are the ones from this episode. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Two Sisters on Adventures. And if you'd like to leave a rating or review on the podcast or YouTube, which we're now caught up on all of our YouTube videos, platform of your choice, we love that because that helps people to find us. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye.